Chapter, wait, 13 or 14? What's wrong with you kids? Chapter 14. In all his plottings, Luke had never thought of the screen door being locked. Though he knew his own parents locked up at night when they didn't forget, the doors at his house had always been open for him, and he had never been near anyone else's door before. "Idiot," he muttered to himself. He tugged harder on the door, but he couldn't concentrate enough to make his hands work together. Each second that passed made the hair on the back of his neck stand up more. He had never been so exposed in his entire life. Hurry, 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 get out of sight. The door didn't budge. He'd have to turn around. Now. That's what his brain said. What his hand did was plunge through the screen. He pulled the wire away from the frame and reached through the door. The screen scraped the back of his hand at his arm, but he still didn't stop. He fiddled with the lock inside until he heard it click. He silently slid the screen door back and stepped past the hanging blinds into the Sports family house. Even with the blinds blocking every window, the room he entered was airy and bright. From the freshly painted walls to the sparkling glass tables to the polished wood floor, everything looked brand new. Luke stared. Almost all the furniture in his own house had been around as long as he could remember, and whatever patterns and designs it had originally carried had long ago worn away. At his house, even the once orangish couch and the once greenish chairs were now all a matching sort of brownish gray. This room was different. It reminded him of a word he had never heard, only read: pristine. Nobody had ever stepped on these white rugs with manure-covered boots. Nobody had ever sat on these pale blue couches with corn dust-covered jeans. Luke might have stood by the door forever in awe, but someone coughed in another room. Then he heard a strange beep, 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 beep. He tiptoed forward, better to discover than be discovered. He went down a long hallway. The beeps had turned into a drawn-out buzzing sound coming from a room at the end of the hall. Holding his breath, Luke stopped outside the door to that room and gathered the nerve to peek in. His heart pounded. There was still time to escape unseen and go back to his house and attic and his normal, safe life. But he'd always wonder. Luke leaned forward slowly, moving a fraction of an inch at a time until he could just barely see around the door. Inside the room was a chair and a desk with a big apparatus that Luke vaguely recognized as a computer. At the computer, typing away furiously, sat a girl. Luke blinked, thrown off. Somehow he had never thought about the Sports family's third child being a girl. She was mostly facing away from Luke, and she wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt, not much different from what the Sports family brothers always wore. Her dark hair was almost as short as Luke's. But there was something about the curve of her cheek and the tilt of her head and the way her sweatshirt clung or didn't cling to her body, all that made Luke certain she wasn't like him at all. He blushed, and then he gulped. The girl turned her head. Luke croaked. Before he had a chance to think of another word, the girl was across the room and had knocked him down. She had pinned him to the floor, his arms twisted behind his back, his face buried in the carpet. Luke struggled to turn his head to breathe. "So," the little girl hissed in his ear, "you think you can sneak up on a poor, innocent, unsuspecting girl who's home all alone? Guess nobody told you about our alarm system. A call went out to our security guards the minute you stepped on our property. They'll be here any second." Luke panicked. So this is how he was going to die. He had to explain. He had to escape. "No," he said, "they can't come. "Oh, yeah?" the girl said. "Who are you to stop them?" Luke raised his head as much as he could. Then he said the first words that popped into his mind. "Population police!" The girl let go. right. People at home, look at your chapter 14 question. People here at school. The question is, was it smart for Luke to say that? Defend your opinion with a sentence or two. All right, chapter 15. Luke sat up, checking his arms to make sure she hadn't broken anything. "You're lying," the girl said, but she made no effort to tackle him again. She crouched, looking puzzled for a few moments. Then she grinned. "Oh, I got it. You're another one. Great code word. I'll have to think about using that for the rally." Now it was Luke's turn to squint in confusion. The girl giggled. "I mean, you're another shadow child, right?" Shadow? Luke wondered why his brain seemed to be slowing down. Was it just because she seemed several miles ahead of him? "That's not the term you use?" she asked. "I thought shadow child was universal, but, in illegal. Someone whose parents broke Population Law 3903, a third child." Luke couldn't bring himself to confess. He had broken so many taboos today, leaving the house, standing in the open yard, talking to a stranger. Why did one more violation matter? "You can say it," the girl coaxed. "Say, I'm a third child." "Why should there be anything wrong with that?" Luke was spared having to answer her because she suddenly sprang to her feet, exclaiming, "Oh no, the alarm!" She raced down the hall and around the corner. Luke followed to find her jerking open a closet door and then punching buttons on a panel of colored lights. "Too late, drat!" She ran to the phone, Luke following breathlessly. She dialed a number, and Luke watched in amazement. He had never talked on the phone in his life. His parents had told him the government could trace calls and could tell if a person's voice on the phone was from a person who was allowed to exist or not. "Dad," she made a face. I know. Call the security company and get them to cancel the alarm, okay? And might I remind you that the penalty for harboring a shadow child is $5 million or execution, depending on the mood of the judge?" She rolled her eyes at Luke while she listened to what seemed to be a long answer from her dad. "Oh, these things happen." Another pause. Yeah. Love you too. Thanks, Dad." She hung up. Luke wondered if he should run back to his house immediately before the population police really did show up. "They can find you now," Luke said, "just from the phone." The girl laughed. "Yeah, they say that, but everybody knows the government's not that competent." Luke started inching toward the back door just in case. "But there really was an alarm?" he asked. "And you have security guards?" "Sure, doesn't everyone?" The girl took another look at Luke. "Oh, maybe not." She winced apologetically as soon as she had said that. Luke decided to ignore the insult. "Do the security guards know you're here?" he asked. "Of course not," the girl said. "If they came, I'd have to hide. Personally, I think my family's just has the alarm system to make sure I stay in the house. They don't know that I know how to disable it. But," and she gave an evil grin, "I set it off sometimes just for fun." "That's fun?" Luke asked. He'd thought another third child would understand him and be just like him. This girl sure wasn't. "Aren't you scared the guards might find you?" "No, not really," the girl shrugged. "And see, doing it on purpose every now and then has helped us today. My dad didn't even really ask why the system needed to be stopped. He just thought it was me making trouble again." In a twisted way, she kind of made sense. But trying to figure out everything made Luke's head hurt, and he glanced toward the door. If he could just get safely home, he'd never complain about being bored again. Here he felt as baffled as Alice in Wonderland from one of the old books in the attic. Or he remembered something he had read in a nature book. Maybe he was like the prey of the snake that hypnotized its victim before it ate them. He didn't think the girl would hurt him, but she might help it might keep him confused and fascinated until the population police or security guards or someone else arrived at the house. The girl saw where he was looking. "Am I scaring you?" she asked. "Shadow kids can be so jumpy. You're safe, you know. How about if we start over? Would you care for a seat? What's your name anyway?" Luke told her. "Nice to meet you," the girl said, shaking his hand in a way that made him feel like she was kind of making fun of him. Then she let him sit down on a couch in the room he had first entered. She perched beside him. "I'm Jen, really Jennifer Rose Talbot, but do I look like a Jennifer to you?" She shook her head and spread out her arms as if Luke should understand something from her rumpled sweatshirt and messy hair. Luke frowned. "I don't know," he said. "I don't know any Jennifers. Just Matthew, Mark, Mother, and Dad." He knew his parents' real name were Edna and Harlan, but he wondered if he shouldn't keep that a secret, just in case. Probably he shouldn't even have mentioned Matthew and Mark, but he was surprised into it, thinking suddenly about how there was a world full of people outside his house, with a world full of different names he had never even heard of. The girl said. "Then I have to explain. A Jennifer is supposed to be like real girly and prissy, so the joke's on my mom. She wanted some frilly little girl she could put in a lacy dress and sit in the corner like a doll." She paused. "Are Matthew and Mark your older brothers?" Luke nodded. "So you've never met anyone outside your own family?" Luke shook his head no. Jen looked so amazed he felt he had to defend himself. "What, and you have?" he asked, almost with the same taunting voice he sometimes used with his brother Mark. "Well, yeah," she said. "But you're a third child," Luke protested. "A shadow child, right?" He suddenly felt like it might be easy to cry if he let himself. All his life he had been told he couldn't do anything that Matthew and Mark did because he was a third child. But if Jen could go about freely, it didn't make sense. Had his parents lied to him? "Don't you have to hide?" he asked. "Sure," Jen said, "mostly. But my parents are very good at bribery, and so am I." She grinned wickedly. Then she squinted at Luke. "How did you know I was a third child? And how did you know I was even here?" Luke told her. Somehow it seemed important to start with the woods coming down, so it turned into a really long story. Jen interrupted frequently with questions and comments. "So you've never been away from your house except to go to your backyard or your barn? You've stayed inside for 6 months straight? And gosh, you must really hate these houses, huh?" And then, when he got to the part about seeing her face in the window, she bit her lip. "My dad would kill me if he knew I had done that. But the mirrors were messed up that day, and Carlos bet me I didn't even know what the weather was like outside, and..." "Huh?" Luke said. "Mirrors? Carlos?" Jen waved away his questions. "Luke Garner," she announced, "you have come to the right place. Forget that hiding like a mole stuff from now on. I'm your ticket out." And that is the end of chapter 15. All right, answer your last question, and we'll see you guys next week.